step back in time to a bygone era when coal powered the heartbeat of industrial expansion and narrow gauge railroads were the lifeblood of the region. Hatchet Creek, one of those narrow gauge railroads, transported the wealth of the earth from coal mines to be exported across the great United States. Let's look at how this railroad shaped the landscape and the countless people who gave their best, and often even their lives, to fuel a nation through times of peace and war. Welcome to Hatchet Creek, Volume 3. As the sun rises over the Appalachians and reveals the morning dew, yet another beautiful summer greets the residents of Hatchet Creek, Pennsylvania. While some are at Jim's Diner grabbing breakfast, others have come from far and wide to see the oldest example of 30-inch narrow gauge in the United States, the Hatchet Creek Railroad. While rail fans flock to the vintage locomotives and Civil War-era machinery, locals and crews of Hatchet Creek talk of a bygone era in this railroad's rich history and its vital role in creating the town it now calls home. The Hatchet Creek Railroad was chartered in 1856 as a branch line of the East Broadtop Railroad and Coal Company. However, the ongoing Civil War between northern and southern states prevented the line's construction. During the war, the original charterers faced financial hardships and were quickly replaced with new investors in 1867. They began construction reaching Robertsdale, Pennsylvania in 1874. While in construction, investors decided that the branch to current-day Nesquehoning, Pennsylvania and Clinton, Pennsylvania would be too costly. All resources would instead be focused on finishing work at Robertsdale. Outraged by the news, locally owned mining operations at Nesquehoning and Norman began to formulate a plan of their own. By 1876, the East Union Coal and Navigation Company was formed and began the year-long process of purchasing land from the East Broadtop and the state of Pennsylvania. As part of the deal, the East Broadtop agreed to provide a mainline connection for coal traffic out of the region in exchange for a percentage of the revenues generated by the new line. A portion of the land acquired would become the site of current-day Hatchet Creek. Here in the Roundhouse, we join the crew of today's Hatchet Creek Train Number 1, powered by Northerns Number 3 and Number 4. The Hatchet Creek Northerns were the most impressive locomotives purchased for the railroad. With a tractive effort of 25,600 pounds, these engines matched up well with the East Broadtop's Mikados and were fundamental to operations during the wartime boom during the late 1940s. As we watch the crew top the tender off with coal, they are now ready to back down onto the consist. Today's train consists of 3 coaches, 2 combines, and a steel gondola, which provides an open-air ride like no other. Watching from the beautifully restored Hatchet Creek Station, the train slowly rolls into the frame for the first of 3 scheduled station stops this morning. As passengers board and the train departs, we head up the line for the climb to East Union. During construction in 1877, surveyors planned a much more gentle grade between Hatchet Creek and East Union, but were instructed by the coal companies to find a cheaper alternative at the expense of a steeper 4% grade. 2 crosses show the ultimate sacrifice made on this grade. On September 5, 1929, Engineer David Saxon and fireman Alan Kempton were on helper service between Hatchet Creek and East Union. Locomotive number 8, a 2662 Malay, was the locomotive assigned to this job. While halfway up the grade, the second engine in the lead pair of Mikados broke loose from the train because of a failed coupler, and the entire weight of the 35-car train was thrust onto the Malay. By the time the two realized that something was very wrong, it was too late. Saxon threw the train into emergency, which by that time was already sliding downgrade back towards Hatchet Creek. The consist hit the curve at the bottom of the grade at approximately 47 miles per hour. The Malay was thrown off the rails and both men were killed instantly. The wreck took 3 weeks to clean up. The 2 men were given a service and buried at the graveyard in Hatchet Creek. Number 8's boiler can be found rotting by the paint shop in Hatchet Creek to this day. As we round the curve at the top of the hill, we find ourselves at Sidling Hill Trestle. This 1,300-foot-long, 75-foot-tall trestle was constructed in May 1877 and recently repaired because of ground subsidence. Areas of repair can be easily seen by looking at the fresh timber sections placed along the bridge. Because of the age of the structure and the tight curves of the East Union Y, a strict 5 miles per hour speed restriction is enforced both over the bridge and through the station. East Union itself was founded in 1876 along with the EUC&N. The company placed its headquarters here, along with a single road engine shed for maintenance and a small yard for car storage. The sheds were expanded to 2 stalls in 1890 and became home to maintenance and snow removal operations after new engine facilities opened in Hatchet Creek in 1910. The area quickly grew over the decades, from a population of 106 in 1880 to 750 in 1920. In more modern times, Main Street has seen new life and businesses, such as Lothar's Bistro and Penguin Ice Cream and Hamburgers, allowing locals and tourists plenty of chances to explore the quiet town within the mountains. Before we continue along the main line to Nesquehoning, we'll follow the trail of the former Clinton branch of the EUC&N. As we head out of East Union, we reach Union Lake. The original pillars and a portion of the span still stand, despite the elements slowly reclaiming them. Beyond the lake sits the small, unincorporated community of Norman. Although originally founded in 1840 by the Norman Coal Company to provide homes for their employees, it later became the site of Norman Tipple No. 1. The EUC&N arrived in Norman in 1877 as part of the extension to Clinton, and would build a small shelter, seeing limited service throughout its life. Today, the site of the flagstop is now home to the Norman Mining Historical Society, a small group of local historians, rail fans, former miners, and local businessmen dedicated to the preservation of the region's deep history in mining and railroading. Among their collection are the new Appalachian Mining Company Plymouth No. 8 and U.S. Steel Corp. Fairbanks Morse No. 9. From the Society's property, we can see the portal into the Norman Tunnel through the rock slides and thick foliage. The Norman Tunnel is just under 2,000 feet in length, and one of the few rough patches during initial construction. On August 2, 1877, 60 men lost their lives during a blasting accident that caused a partial collapse of the new tunnel. After passing through the Norman Tunnel, we enter the former site of the Clinton mining camp. This area was founded when the EUC&N reached Clinton in 1877 after the completion of the Norman Tunnel. Site of Norman Tipple No. 2, the area boasted a population of almost 1,000 miners at its peak in 1890 and showed for it with the large 3-track yard built to accommodate the large quantities of coal from Tipple No. 2. While sounds of miners singing the long nights away have grown silent, campers today enjoy a night under the stars as the site has been redeveloped into Clinton Campground and RV Park. As the shadow of Tipple No. 2 casts onto the campground entrance, a penguin statue can be seen peeking out. The statue has made the campground a must-see roadside stop, drawing from a local legend for its origin. The flying penguin is a legendary creature said to inhabit the forest of Fulton County. Its origins are unclear, but the earliest sightings of the creature date back to 1731, when settlers of Nesquehoning described the creature as having a long, pointed beak, short, portly body, bird-like feet, and sharp claws. While most pass the story off as an urban legend, some believe the penguin is still out there and has been responsible for a series of reported missing persons within the region. Whether or not that's true, we'll leave up to you. Returning to East Union, we rejoined the Hatchet Creek main line and continued toward Nesquehoning. The main line was completed on July 7, 1880, connecting to the massive Crystal Lake Mineral Company's Daugus mine. The coal production from Daugus significantly overshadowed that of Norman Coal's operations, prompting the need for longer and, in turn, heavier trains. The fleet of 440 Americans and 460 10-wheelers could cope with the increases, but the EUC&N knew it required stronger engines to meet demand. They approached Baldwin Locomotive Works of Philadelphia for an order of 282 Mikados, a decision made following the East Broadtop's success with the class. In the early months of 1911, the EUC&N would become a relic of the past as the mining companies sold their majority stake in the EUC&N to the Hatchet Creek Railroad Company, a private venture by Trevor L. Titus, a railroad manager who previously advised Pennsylvania Railroad President Alexander Cassatt. Titus inherited the somewhat stable Hatchet Creek line with an able but aging roster of engines. Between the boom of the 1920s and Titus's ownership, the Hatchet Creek Railroad was able to prosper. As we climbed the 1.5% grade along the ridges, we passed through Mahoning, Pennsylvania. This tiny settlement was once a bustling little town with a general store, church, and small sawmill. When the railroad arrived in 1879, a spur was built to supply Mahoning with general freight and serve the Ogwick Sharps & Company sawmill. The town peaked with 250 residents in 1930. However, in 1935, a fire broke out in the forest and crept toward Mahoning. By mid-afternoon, the blaze had reached Mahoning, and strong winds would only fuel the fire as the town was quickly engulfed in the flames. After 2 days, the fire was finally contained, and all that remained was devastation. The only structure left standing was the church, while all other buildings had been burned to the ground. In total, 95 people lost their lives during the fire, while hundreds received minor injuries. The town was never able to recover, and despite years of rebuilding, was left semi-abandoned. The years following the forest fire would be my hardest test yet and would have me wondering if we could survive another quarter, Mr. Titus would write in his journal. The land was acquired by the state in 1967 for a new campsite within the new state forest. The original platform at Mahoning was rebuilt to bring people and materials to and from the construction site, but was demolished in 1968 to make way for the new Mahoning Station building that currently occupies the site. After the fire at Mahoning, Mr. Titus founded the site of Crystal Falls, a resort for miners and their families to relax during vacations and time off from work. The site was to sit atop his private estate. The falls gained a reputation among mining employees as the best perk of the job. The views overlooking the crystal clear lake below would be hard to find anywhere else. For us, the massive Crystal Falls Bridge is the star of the show, standing at over 160 feet tall. This structure is the second iteration of the bridge. The original trestle was too weak to handle the newer locomotives being rebuilt in 1905. Crystal Falls serves much the same purpose it always has, a vacation destination for the workers of the area. Titus's home was later turned into a bed and breakfast, as well as a small museum, which tells about the site and Titus's legacy. The general store has become a gift shop with golf cart rentals. 2 of the original cabins remain. Originally, they were offered to miners and their families to stay the night for an additional charge. Now they host recreations of the life of the miners, including actors who continue to play the role of a mining family on vacation during the 1930s. Coming out of Crystal Falls, we find ourselves deep in the woods and ever closer to Nesquehoning. Before we enter the town, we must first pass through the Mount Granada Tunnel. This 1,078-foot-long tunnel was the last to be blasted in the winter of 1879, breaking daylight between East Union and Nesquehoning for the first time. The steel beams creak from Douglas Mine, yet the rushes of coal seemed endless during the Second World War. Unfortunately, coal traffic would begin to slowly drop off, and layoffs would begin shortly after the war. The freight depot at Crystal Lake would close, and general freight would fall to 5 to 6 trains a month. While trains continued to run, their costs rose as trains got lighter and shorter. In 1956, things turned for the worst as the East Broad Top Railroad, their main interchange partner for nearly 75 years, ended common carrier service and ceased operations. The transfer bridge was reworked for trucks in the 1960s, but the road continued to struggle. The whistle blasts as our crew makes their final station stop for this half of the trip. We have arrived in Nesquehoning. The word Nesquehoning is commonly believed to mean narrow valley. Native language scholars, however, believe it to mean at the dirty lick, referring to the mineral licks frequented by deer and other animals. The settlement was founded in 1730 and became known for the deep veins of coal within the surrounding mountain. By 1800, a small village formed and was home to horses and wagons shipping coal across the region. Crystal Lake Mineral Company knew that by crossing the mountains and bringing their coal out to the markets of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, they could make a massive profit. The risk was high, but when the EUCNN arrived in 1880, the gamble had paid off. Nesquehoning was a large benefactor of this gamble. The population surged to 946 in 1910 and remains around 648 today. The downtown was redeveloped in the mid-1920s, becoming a place with a busy little heartbeat. While people held hope through the decades, key industries would close throughout the 1960s, and trackage would be removed up to the main road crossing in 1965. As we stand near the old diamond at the Y, we watch our locomotives work their way back to the station. Before we depart Nesquehoning for the trip back down, we head east to a forgotten section of the railroad. As we walk down the remains of an old set-off and sneak through the rock slides, we find the remains of the Eastern Logging and Lumber Company's log camp. This operation existed from 1882 to 1940 and employed number 11, a B-28-2 Shay. Built by Lima in 1907 to move heavy logs from the camp to the yard at Nesquehoning for pickup by the EUCNN. The logging camp would be the provider of logs for the railroad for their telegraph poles and supports across the line. The camp would close in 1940, following Eastern Logging being purchased by Omega Logging, Inc. As the train departs Nesquehoning, we take one final look at Douglas Mine. The mine would see its last train in early 1977 after one of the main pulleys failed, destroying much of the gearing. Following closure, many local politicians have called for its removal, citing safety concerns. For now, it stands as a constant reminder of this railroad's deep ties throughout all the communities it has passed through for over 100 years. We guess that's why, when the future of Hatchet Creek looked to be one for the history books, Nick Kowalczyk, who had recently purchased the East Broad Top Railroad in 1960, also purchased the Hatchet Creek from a private broker in late 1977. As we have seen throughout our journey, the Kowalczyks have done their best to keep this railroad going and operate Hatchet Creek in tandem with the East Broad Top, often having joint events together. The future looks bright once again for this little patch of heaven with steady leadership, an enthusiastic group of volunteers, and growing ridership. The railroad is ready for its second golden era, and we hope you'll be there to join us out there on the high iron. We hope you've enjoyed this featured presentation. For more quality Trainz content, please visit theswitchbacktrains.com.